Building or installing operating systems for deployment across hybrid cloud environments can be slow, tedious, and error-prone. In this demo, we look at an opinionated approach in setting up a golden image pipeline to build a hardened base image for Windows Server 2019. The pipeline leverages the workflow functionality in the Ansible Automation Platform to build the image. A build is triggered whenever there is a merge request in GitLab. We have decided to go with the GitOps approach as it is a developer-centric approach to continuous delivery and infrastructure operation. With Git as the single source of truth, we will be able to drive operations through Git workflows. In this scenario, a golden image pipeline helps the operations team in different ways. For instance, the pipeline allows easy rebuild of the base OS image, and the rebuilt image is also going to be properly hardened and updated with the latest security patches addressing all the CVEs. This means that developers will have timely access to images that are regularly updated instead of potentially stale images that may have missing patches or missing hardening policies. This allows them to be able to test and validate their applications on up-to-date golden images and is aligned with the idea of DevSecOps, where security should be implemented earlier in the lifecycle following a shift-left approach so that it can have an outsized impact on improving security and minimizing the overall operational overhead that's required. And while the pipeline shown here is mainly used for golden image building, it can be easily extended to include continuous integration for applications as well as any other custom requirements or configurations. So if we were to look at the pipeline itself, the webhook will get triggered whenever there is a merge request in GitLab. What happens next is that the Ansible Automation Platform, the controller itself, will start to pull the codes from the Git repo. The next step is to be able to create a secondary ISO that contains the auto unattended XML that's needed for silent installation of the Windows Server. The PowerShell scripts and other relevant files will also be packed into this second ISO. After this step is done, the next step is to create a new Windows-based server and to install the operating systems with the relevant ISOs and answer file. Then we will go on to update the Ansible Automation Platform inventory, followed by the base image hardening, update on all the relevant patches, as well as to perform additional tasks such as antivirus, storage, or monitoring agents installation. In our case, because we are building on top of the VMware platform, we will also want to ensure that the VMware tools are properly updated, and hence this falls under the additional task that we have in this pipe. The last step of which is to convert the base VM to a golden image. The demo that we have is on the VMware virtualization platform, and hence the base image will be converted to the VMware template. So if it is something that we are doing for the public cloud, for instance, on Amazon Web Service, then we will be able to convert this into an AMI image that we can use it for future EC2 instance deployment. So this is how the pipeline will look like in the Ansible Automation Platform workflow. We have a screenshot of the visualizer. What we can see over here are the various tasks that has been modeled using Ansible playbooks and roles and stitched together using a workflow. So we can see that whenever there is a failure or something that is unexpected based on the results and the output, we will be able to perform an alternate workflow, which may include things like cleaning up of the resources or performing some rollback actions. So this will then allow us to be able to orchestrate the whole flow, and it's better than just having a straight-through pipeline because we will be able to control the alternate path and the actions to be performed. So we will look at the demo next. So over here, we have the web server that houses all the relevant software packages as well as ISO images and other relevant configuration files, PowerShell scripts, etc. Right. So over here, we are having two directories. The first one being the unattended ISO, and the second directory being the Windows Server ISO. Right. So the Windows Server ISO itself basically houses the ISO image of different Windows Server releases. The one that we are interested today is the Windows Server 2019. Right. So this is the ISO image that is being used for the actual setup. Right. So let's just go back, and there is this unattended ISO directory, which basically builds another ISO image, right, that has the auto unattended XML file that will be used as the answer file for the silent installation. So we do have a copy that was built back in November, right? So we're going to build one for December using the current pipe that we have. So there is another directory, right, that basically houses the various versions of the VMware tools. So the one that is inside our current environment is the EXX 6.7 U3 release, right? So I get the VMware tools from the packages.vmware.com and house it on-prem. So this is the web server. Other things that we have over here, where we do have to set up the relevant settings for the Ansible controller and the GitLab itself. So in order to set up the webhook, we will have to go to the GitLab and set up appropriate configurations. The URL, secret tokens are all retrieved from the controller itself, right? So you can see over here that the pipeline that we are interested in, the workflow template that we're interested in, has this particular URL that can be used for the GitLab webhook. And the associated webhook key, right, is stated over here. We have the credentials as the GitLab access token. So we fill in the information accordingly, and the webhook will get triggered whenever there is a merge request event, right? So that is what is going on over here with this configurations. So let's just go and look at what we have over here in the GitLab repo. The repo that we have set up basically contains what I call as the unattended install YAML that describes all the information, right, that is needed in order to set up this environment. So we can see that, for instance, the ISO build itself, right? So we will define things like the default disk size, right? What are the default user password, as well as the DNS information, the default VM IP. All these are the informations that we pass in order to build this particular base ISO VM, right? The VM that we build from the ISO image, a base VM, and we will pass in informations relating to the VMware cluster as well, right? So we can see over here that these are just information relating to the data store, the data center, the folder, which network we are putting the base VM in, etc. Right? So VMware tools, web server information, and other requirements, right? So in this case, we have the hardening requirements, where we look at the sections that we are going to harden and update, right? So hardening requirements are based on CIS standards, can be based on the PCI DSS standards for the payment industry, and it can also be based on other standards such as NIST, right? So if we were to look at requirements, right? So in this case, I have different sections being defined over here, right? So we are able to freely decide on the section that we want to have being used, right? In this case, to harden the image, right? So for instance, under the password section, we have defined all the information that's related to the password expiry, history size, the complexity. For instance, the account log section, the logout section, right, will have things like the logout duration, etc. Right, so all these things are kind of based out of a subset of the Windows CIS compliance. Of course, we are free to customize accordingly to add or remove things from this. But by and large, quite a fair bit of deployment that we have seen are using CIS as a benchmark, right? Then the next thing that we have, right, is around the Windows Update category, right? So you are free to decide on the categories that we will be using in order to update the software packages on the Windows-based VM, right, that will address all the CVEs and other issues that is found on the VM. So the other things that I wanted to show before we start is around the creation of this ISO, right? What are the things that we are putting in? In order for this to work, right, we do need a auto unattended XML, right? We use template within Ansible, right, to go and generate the XML file. So it's up to us to customize what we want to do with this answer file that we're going to use for the silent installation. Right, some of the stuff that I've changed, for instance, the disk size, right, it's referencing to the variables that we have defined in the earlier YAML file. Other things that we have are over here, right, things relating to the username, the password, and what are the things that we do within the script itself, installing VMware tools, enabling WinRM, right, setting up the default IP address and DNS servers that we have defined in the variable files. And obviously, we can do more things, add more stuff inside this auto unattend.xml. This answer file will get picked up during the installation itself automatically by the system, right? So you can see this is the PowerShell script that will just configure the IP address, right, as well as the DNS. Right? All this are going to be pulling the information directly from the variable files. Then we have this PowerShell script, right, that basically sets up the WinRM. So these are the various stuff that we have. So the next thing that we want to do is to create a new build for December 2021. And that means we have to make changes to the variable files accordingly. And that means that we will have to go to Visual Studio Code to create a new branch and make the changes and commit and push them, right? So let's just go to Visual Studio Code. We can see that we are on the main branch over here. Let's just create a new branch. We name it Golden Image December 2021. So now we are on the Golden Image December 2021 branch, right? So we can make changes, for instance, to the name, right? From November, we change to December. We can change, for instance, the CPU from 2 to 4, right? We can also change, right, the memory from 8 gig to 16 gig. So with all these changes made, right, we want to save them. Right, and we can see that right now from here, right, there are changes that we have to commit and push it. So I can say, for instance, new build for December 2021, and then I'll say yes and sync the changes, right? So if you go back to GitLab, then you can see over here that the new branch has been created, right? And we'll create a request. Right, so we will call it new build for December 2021. Our description will be new build for December 2021, Windows Server 2019. Create merge request. Right, so once this is done, what is going to happen is the job will get triggered over here in Ansible. Right, so the workflow will have started. So the first thing that it does is that it goes and get the variable information from the GitLab, right, from the source code repository, and then it goes on to create another new ISO for this month, right, with the auto unattended XML and all the other relevant files that we need for the silent installation to happen. And then it will start to install from ISO, right? If we were to go into vCenter, right, you can see that right now there is only one base image for November, right? There's no VM yet created for the base image. So the first thing that it does, right, is that it goes and download the Windows Server ISO, right, to the VMware data store from the web server. So if you go to look at the data store, you can see that this is a file that's being downloaded at this juncture in time. So we can see that the file has been downloaded. So with all the files downloaded, the virtual machine has also been created, right? So if we were to go back, you can see that setup is starting. So the whole process of silent installation with the answer file has started. So we just have to wait for this to complete. So we can see that it has finished the initial installation, goes into reboot mode to set up the rest of the configurations. So the first thing that's being done is to set up the VMware tools. So the VMware tools are being installed and configured automatically. We are also setting up the Windows Remote Management Protocol configurations so that the listener can be up. Ansible uses WinRM to do remote PowerShell scripting and management of Windows machine, right? We also set up the default IP address as well as the DNS information, right? So basically, these are all done using the answer file. So you can see that the VMware tools are now running with upgrade available, right? And it does get the default IP that we have defined in the variable files. So let's just go back to Ansible. So on this part, right, you would have added the VM to the inventory, right, and then use it to access the information that's needed in order to access the virtual machine, right? So the next thing that it does is that it just waits for the connectivity to be established with the Windows VM, right, before running the actual hardening itself. So let's just wait for a while, right? So we can see that it took about slightly more than 5 minutes to connect, and it starts to run the hardening script and baseline on this particular base VM that we have created. So it will take a while for this to run through the different sections that we have. So those things which are in green means that it's already at the correct value, right? Those things that is yellow, right, shows that we are making changes to the current setup and settings of this particular base Windows VM. So the hardening is done and that it is printing out the relevant account settings, and also the relevant security settings are all being dumped at this point in time, right? So we can see that, for instance, these are the settings that we have mentioned over here, right? For instance, the history size for the password, the maximum password age, the minimum password age, right? So all these things are consistent, right, with the value that we've seen over here. And the rest of the security settings, we are also printing it for audit purpose, right? So all these logs will be the audit trails for this particular task, right? So then let's just go back over here, right? You can see that it is running the next task, which is really to update the Windows Server. So we can see that it is starting to download the relevant packages. In this case, the Microsoft Defender antivirus. So in most cases, the Windows VM will be connected to WSUS and the relevant packages will be downloaded from there. So we can see over here, right, that the download has completed. The next phase is really to go and install the packages. So you can see that it's starting the install progress. So you can see that it's starting to install and the progress at this juncture in time is 33%. So we can see that it starts to install the rest of the packages, and those installed packages requires a reboot of the systems. So you can see that the reboot process is handled automatically by Ansible. So Ansible is validating the reboot. The system came back and is starting another round of updates and checks. So all these things are handled automatically by the Win Update module from Ansible. So it is installing further security updates after the first round of reboot. Right. So this round is done. Is checking around for the third round. Right. So this is going to go on until it finish updating all the stuff that is needed and done with all the reboots that is required to get the system fully updated. So at this juncture in time, you can see that everything is done, right? So the JSON output will show you all the stuff that has been performed on the systems, right? And that everything is actually successful in this case based on the categories that we have defined, right? So let's just go back to the jobs, right? So for this portion, we are going to update the VMware tools, right? So if we were to go back to vCenter, you can see that the upgrade is in progress, right? For the VMware tools, and then installation is in progress. So all this is handled by the VMware module in Ansible, right? And it actually does a reboot of virtual machine, right, for it to take effect. So essentially, this particular task can also be used to install any monitoring agents, antivirus agents, or storage agents, right? For instance, on this particular base image, if we want, right? So over here, I'm just updating on the VMware tools, right? And so you see that it has been updated, and we check that the connection has been restored, right? So we're able to log it back in. The next part of it, right, really is on the last portion, right? We are going to convert the VM into template, right? So you can see that Ansible is shutting it down automatically using the module that's available before we can do the conversion of this particular image to template, right? So you can see over here that this is initiated by Ansible, right? And then we have converted the VM into a template. So over here now you see that this is the December 2021 image with all the proper patches, hardening scripts and everything else that's properly updated. So with this pipeline, we can actually do this thing in an easy and effective fashion. We can do it regularly, right? It doesn't have to be on a monthly basis. For instance, whenever there is a software patches release, if there is a new CVEs, we can just run the pipe again and just create another copy of this and use it for testing development or to build the applications on top, right? So all these things are possible, right? Now that we have these capabilities using Ansible as the orchestration platform, right? So the job is all done, right? Everything is successful from the Ansible controller perspective, right? So let's check it out, right? So what do we have over here? So the pipe is all good, right? So everything is done. We are happy with the results. We can just approve the change, right? After that, I will just say that it looks good to me. And then I'm going to merge. So once I hit the merge button, it is going to delete the branch and everything will get merged into the main branch. Right, so this is all good. We are at the end of the demo. Thank you for watching.